Today's episode starts with a game I found out about a long time ago in connection to one of my all-time favorite racing games, Rally Speedway, which was designed by John Anderson. I found another game of his through the GameBase 64, although the C64 port of Arex was handled by Philip Case, and a working C64 version has yet to be surfaced. So it's the Atari computer where I'll be playing it for the foreseeable future. Arex is an arcade puzzle action game that is a bit harder to describe than it looks. There are two game modes, which are played in either an arena or a set of dungeons. The game plays a bit like any classic Snake variant in that you can only move in 4 cardinal directions, and your mission is basically to just cover as much of the area as possible. Meanwhile, you have to deal with 4 different kinds of enemies by either trapping them between your trails or by shooting them. The weird thing is, you shoot arrows backwards, which gives Arex its own particular feel. I didn't find out about Arex until well into the 2000s, but because of its mysterious status, it's become one of my favorite games to play on the Atari, even if I'm not very good at it yet. I would like to someday play the C64 conversion as well, but I highly doubt it shall ever happen. Another classic from Synapse Software is a game I used to play a lot more on the Commodore 64, but Pharaoh's Curse is just as good on the Atari, if not better, and I had to leave some of those obvious Atari-originated C64 favorites for the Atari. Pharaoh's Curse is a flip-screen platformer, largely in a similar vein to Montezuma's Revenge, but the scale and design is very different. The idea is to collect all the items from the game map and open the exit to the next level. Your path is endangered by a bunch of enemies, obstacles, wandering birds that can carry you off to faraway places, and random surges passing through the lift stand points. The game has such an ominous and unfamiliar feel to it that it's refreshing to play it every time I decide to load it up. Even the somewhat random sounding title music feels like it shouldn't work, but in the context it somehow does. If Montezuma's Revenge was a case of platforming perfection and a certain hit game in its time, Pharaoh's Curse represents a more artsy side of the coin, and I can't recommend it enough to classic platforming enthusiasts. One of my favorite games from English Software is this relatively unknown game that doesn't seem to have been released outside of the 4th Atari Smash Hits compilation tape, which seems a bit odd when you consider the compilation name. Fire Chief by Tim Huntington is rated by Atari Mania users to be his best game by a large margin, which kind of makes the game a cult classic and probably might be an Atari Smash hit in hindsight, but whatever it did to deserve a place on such a compilation beats me. But it's the only Atari Smash Hits tape that I have, which is reason enough to include this game here. Then again, it is a very good game, deserving the occasional nostalgia trip. Much like many of my C64 favorites, Fire Chief is played in a couple of very different sections, separated by a nice cutscene, all of which go together extremely well with the subject matter. First, you need to rush through the traffic in your fire engine through a straight 4-lane motorway, and then after the game shows you your arrival on the scene, you need to get to the other side of the maze-like room by shooting water to the flames, pick up a disc, and then get back to the other side of the room. After another short cutscene, the game continues in a similar vein. As separate parts, it's nothing amazing, but the sum of its parts makes it a greater game than you would expect. It's one of my most favorite 8-bit Atari games of all time, even if I didn't learn about it until after emulation came along. Highly recommendable. Cosmi was a peculiar software house in that on a few occasions they released very different, if not completely different versions of the same game to different platforms. One of these games was Caverns of Khafka from 1983, which, in a similar way to Aztec Challenge, was written for the Atari computers by Robert Bonifacio. But contrary to Aztec Challenge, Caverns of Khafka was written for the Atari first. The Atari version of Khafka has the appearance and feel shared by many classic Atari platforming adventures, and the closest games the Commodore 64 gamers would compare this to would be Anthony Crowther's Monty Mole and maybe Stefan Posthumus' Hades, while the Commodore 64 version of Khafka is another Paul Norman oddity, almost completely unrelatable to any other game. As it is, Atari's Kafka's classic style works to its advantage. Even though there's nothing particularly remarkable about Caverns of Khafka, as presented by Robert Bonifacio, it is an enjoyable and somewhat addicting game. Definitely one of those games that will live on purely through nostalgia, but it's still better than many other Atari games I've played. Last but certainly not least, I would have loved to include Realm of Impossibility from Electronic Arts on this list, but I haven't been able to actually play that game on my Atari 800XL because apparently you need the operating system revision B to be able to load the game, and my Atari seems to have OS revision A. So I'm stuck with playing the game Realm of Impossibility was expanded from, Zombies, published by Bram Incorporated in 1983. The idea and design is pretty much the same though. You traverse through somehow diagonally viewed areas, avoid zombies, find treasures and bring them back to the starting point. All the levels can be played in any order, although it is recommended to start from the beginning, since the first levels are there basically to act as tutorials. The most basic action you need to do in addition to walking around is to drop traps, or perhaps more precisely obstacles, to halt the zombies. You can also pick up magic scrolls which can do 3 possible things: make you invincible for a short period, freeze a zombie for a while, or make a zombie confused for a while. The only way Zombies differs from its enhanced version is with a smaller number of levels, but it is also a much more uncommon collector's item than Realm of Impossibility. Of course, I've only ever been able to play either game through emulation or using an SD card reader on my Atari 800XL, since I was only introduced to these two games after starting the Finnish retro game comparison blog.